This is Kimberly Quinn, host of the Mindcraft podcast, and I can't tell you how much fun I have had doing this podcast. I started when the world closed over the pandemic in an attempt to spread some positivity out there and give people some strategies to enhance their own well being and reduce anxiety and all of that. Now, 2 years later, we're still going strong and now listened to by 52 countries across the world. And I've even helped some of my students get going with their own podcasts. It's super easy to do. And I'll tell you, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it is the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. I'll just explain for you. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. It is a ball. Start today. Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to another, what I hope is an interesting conversation for all of you. I know it definitely is for me on the joy dash of dash living room. So the joy of living rooms. That's what I'm going to talk about today with you. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I'm thrilled to talk about this. And it's also kind of coming naturally to me since we're finally able to renovate. But that said, we've been in this house for 2000 since 2001. It's 2022 with 5 kids. Finally, I just want to make a disclaimer though that just so nobody's perceiving anything as braggy or I'm like if you know the backstory, I didn't even have anywhere to live consistently from sort of towards like the end of high school through college. I lived in lots of tiny spaces, so I want to be really clear that we're not talking about money, big budgets, or large spaces or anything like that. When we're talking about this, we're talking about creative expression authentic creative expression. And in fact, those with smaller spaces and less money really have to let the creativity flow full throttle, to have things come out in a way that's pleasurable, and it is so possible. I've been doing it my entire life with various small spaces on a shoestring budget. So I just want to start out by saying that my inspiration, which means in spirit, is coming from Sarah Von Bresnick today and her book Simple Abundance. And so I want to start out with a quote by Lucy Abbott Throop. And she says, "Some of the living rooms we see have really no right to the name. They are so unattractive, they ought instead to be called existing rooms. I like to think of the word living rooms being short for the joy of living rooms. That is what they ought to be, full of life and happiness and beauty." So as I mentioned, I definitely would label myself as a creative. It just has taken from just being a small child all the way up through is always doing something, writing songs, building go-karts, and then in my adult life, decoupaging, making movies, writing books, creativity in the classroom, creativity in auditoriums, doing presentations, podcasts, all kinds of things. And I also, when I was at home, an at home mom with our 5 kids, I also went through, it was also sort of like the decoupaging phase. I went through a creativity, or interior decorating phase too. And which was funny with my ADHD because my husband would laugh. I left more than one wall half painted. Once I got to see how it looked, no longer concerned about the parts you can't see. So he would just laugh at the tape dangling, everything else. But I went through a phase where my kids called me the mad painter. They would come home and there would be, everything be look entirely different. And, just sort of pick a room and hone in on it. And it's also, speaking of budgets, paint is actually one of the most inexpensive ways to get some change. And for me, I need change. I don't want to be looking at the same thing forever. Leave it there for a while because that's fun too. You don't want to change it every 2 seconds, but so to speak. But it is such a nice breath of fresh air. So that's where we're gonna go with this one. Of course, though I'm not a feng shui expert, I do know some about feng shui. And one of the main principles of feng shui, which is also rearranging, space saving, decluttering, not having any dead flowers. Actually, like you buy You buy fake arrangements. I did not know that till relatively a few years ago, I guess, relatively recently, is because they're lifeless. So it's like fresh flowers or don't do it. But anyway, the idea around feng shui, and I actually did get rid of them actually after that. One of the main idea with feng shui is you want you that something that's inviting. You want to be in that room. You want to be in that room. It like pulls you in like a wonderful aroma of a fabulous dinner. It just pulls you right in. That's what we're striving for. So Sarah then continues. She says, "Last week I went over to a friend's house for lunch, and when I walked into her foyer and glanced at her living room, I was taken aback with surprise and delight. It had been about 6 months since I'd last visited, and the entire room had been transformed. Everything looked so pulled together. I immediately told her how fabulous the room looked and felt. After a closer look, I realized that she hadn't redecorated. She had just added decorative details that made the room come alive, moving some paintings around, changing the mantle, and dressing up her couches with striking new tapestry pillows that highlighted the subtle colors of her upholstery." Gosh, I cannot tell you how many times I've done this. And especially when we were a one income household, for the most part, I was doing a workshop here and there, but for the most part, when I was home with the kids, 90 plus percent of the time, and on a one income budget, there wasn't a lot of extra for anything more than a little splash of paint. And it's amazing how when you just take everything off the walls and only put back up what you really want, how it looks, and you're like, "Oh, do I really want that?" It's like kinda like we get locked into, "Oh, so and so brought this, treasure back from their travels in Brazil," or whatever. Maybe it's really cool, and maybe just haven't parted with it for like the last 15 years, even though it was cool, still might be cool. But maybe your whole theme of your living room has changed and it doesn't fit anymore. So there's nothing wrong with getting rid of it, moving it on to a thrift store. And that's a whole nother thing with decluttering. If it doesn't bring you joy anymore, move it on to somebody else who it might bring joy to. It's just so important. And then Sarah also says, what's more, she revealed that she'd found the pillows on sale and that the entire freshening up was accomplished for under $50. Imagine that. And though truthfully, I've never been much of a yard seller. I think it's just because I'm not that patient. Because that's a really good place to find things, actually. Because just like we're saying with you moving something along, other people are doing the same thing. So, even though that Brazilian piece of artwork might not be with your current theme, other people are doing the same thing, and you can get something for a much, much, much reduced price, especially if they just want rid of it. So what we're really talking about is less is more for sure. And that trick of taking everything off the walls has really worked for me. And another one that's similar, which happens when people move, but I have done before. I've kind of like pretended like we were moving, just with one room at a time. And currently, it's our master bedroom. I'm not going to get into that now because we're talking about the living room. But it's a very nice space that is just all of a sudden I don't want to even be in there right now because it's accumulated stuff again, which, as you know, I can't stand. So that'll be maybe a podcast for next week. But what I've done in the past is take every single thing out of there and only put back in what you really truly want and what brings you joy. It really works. So again, it happens naturally when people move, like new house, because you have to get out of there, right? But you can pretending like you're moving can really help with decluttering and filtering out what is truly meaningful to you from what just no longer is a good fit in your life and might fit somebody else better and bring them joy. And then there's a part here where Sarah really tapped into um, something that I have kind of been doing, but I like how she states it. She says, for a lot of us, the thought of decorating, like almost everything else in our lives, seems overwhelming, especially in the pandemic, right? Wow. In our minds, we don't just tackle one corner of a room until it pleases us, but try to revamp an entire house in a day. And this is so true. And right now, we've got um, a a gentleman working on the outside. We kind of switched to the outside, and he's at his own pace. He's got things going on. He's kind of a 4 hour a day person. He's very sort of focused on the bottom deck, which is not appealing. It was painted. I don't know whoever thought that was a good idea because paint's kind of dangling. So right now he's in this power washing phase, and I'm thinking, my with my ADHD, I want everything yesterday. And I'm like, ooh, I want the instant grat. I just want to see new paint on the outside. I want to see it all looking totally sexy in like 2 days. And he's just very focused on the bottom deck, which is there's not a lot of excitement right there for me because it's dangling paint strands and there's kind of it's underneath. So it's kind of like some mossy, greeny stuff he's bleaching off. And I'm like, it's about as much fun as putting a septic tank in right now. And then it's interesting that the universe does this synchronistically. I'm doing a lot of or a couple of podcasts on that lately, is the fact that I put it out there to the universe to bring us a house painter and he showed up and he's different. He's definitely a different thinker. And I it's interesting that Sarah says this because I abandoned my instant grat for what's going on the outside of the house. We picked out the colors and everything because he's so focused on this bottom deck with the moss and the dangling paint. And I'm thinking, you know what? Even before I just read this right now, it was just so synchronistic. I can't even tell you. Is I'm like, you know what? That's where his momentum is. It needs to be done. It's not like it's extra. It looks horrible. And he's very into it. And I thought, you know what? Let's just let him focus on the deck and have this be where my focus shifts too. And it's interesting. The more he's just cleaning off, he literally hasn't done anything exciting yet with paint. It's just the prep part. And already, two of our young adult daughters are home. They're saying, "Mom, look at this. It's getting cleaner." And what imagine if it looks so great, we can get new deck furniture for the bottom deck we've never even used before. And like, I'm like, wow, let's just block out the whole rest of the house that I had my, I of course wanted the front done and the stairs and the entrance, and he's nowhere near that. He's on the yucky, gross bottom deck and our girls are already talking about it looking brand new and sitting out there and reading and having it be this nice new part of our house. And uh wow. So this is what we're talking about is sticking, regardless of the size of your house or your budget, to just focus on one corner at a time. It can be a one bedroom studio apartment, but making sure each and every corner pleases you, that the ceiling pleases you, that the floor pleases you, that your artwork pleases you, that the clutter situation is handled. It's really you want to be in each corner of your house or apartment or living space. That's what we're talking about. And with creative expression, your living space should explain you. So Sarah continues, she says, in our minds, we don't just tackle one corner of room until it pleases us, but try to revamp an entire house in a day. The prospect is so exhausting we don't even start. Instead of thinking of decorating as one more burden to deal with, we need to lighten up, to view it as a continuing source of personal expression and contentment. There are no prizes being awarded here, just finding what brings you pleasure. And so for us, I think I mentioned it again, just reminder of the disclaimer. I've had small spaces my whole life and also no spaces when I didn't have any place to live. Although I didn't worry about it, I knew that I had such good friends and all through St. Mike's, my friends are all gracious to me. Their parents are gracious to me. So, but I do know what it's like to live out of my car and stuff. So I'm not that person. And here we are, 2022. So it's been 21 years since we moved in this house, and it had the cracked, crappy countertops and everything till it was June of last year. So it's just been a year. And wow. And I have been doing the one room at a time, also for financial reasons, but I can't even explain how good it feels to just have that personal that. And I am a creative, so that stuff lights me up. That's just like I this part of who I am is being creative. I just love personal expression and how good it feels to just stand in the center of a room when you've maybe again it's not a budget thing. Splash some paint on the walls, swapped out the artwork. In fact, my favorite, I'm a skier, as a lot of you know. I've got some pictures in my sexy new kitchen with red gondolas for skiing. Like they look like they're from Stowe. We just let people think that, but I actually bought them on Amazon for $60. I don't tell anybody that. I just say thank you and let them think it's Stowe. It might be Stowe. I don't know that it's not Stowe. So it's not like it's lying or anything because it's quite possible. With these snow scenes in Amazon, $60, and it so sets the tone for the whole kitchen. And then the living room we hadn't bought living room furniture for like about 15 years, I don't think. And my husband got a very modest bonus, and we kind of mutually decided to it's time. And we went and got some very rustic looking furniture. It was very reasonable from New Hampshire, and it's goes with our rustic theme, and it's kind of the earth tones and the bears, and it's just exciting. And he was happy with his self expression, and it all gels together just beautifully. And Sarah winds up, which is with the quote that we started the whole thing with. She said, "A beautiful home is an education in itself, but it is not made in a day. It must slowly grow." Lucy Abbott Throop, who wrote on decorating in the early decades of this century, actually, this was okay, reassured her readers in 1910. Geez, so that was actually the 20th century. Um, versus now in 2022. Today, look for the lessons your home is waiting to teach you through love. Begin with your living room. Make it as cozy, charming, and comfortable as you can with the resources you now have. It will become a joy to live in. So, and I do remember reading this. Like I said, when I was home with our kids, loving every second of being home with our kids. Again, the occasional workshop, but I was home like 97% of the time. I remember reading this back then, again on a one income home, and really, it's amazing how much you can do on a shoestring, and a lot of it isn't adding. A lot of it is subtracting. Again, you take things away, then also move things around, and then also repurposing. I became like a repurposed queen with decoupaging old chairs, and that I did go to yard sales actually, and I'm a fan of yard sales. I just don't think I have the patience for them, but I would find these old chairs that were literally $10. I think I got one for like $5 once. And I did the whole. There was a time when our dining room was full of individually decoupaged chairs, which I did based on the personality of my husband or the whichever child that was. It was their chair. I did it specific to them. So the only investment was the paint and the decoupaging kind of materials, which most of which can be found in the house, paper towels, stuff like that. And it just changed the whole look of the room. So that's it. The joy of living rooms. So the joy of living rooms. You want to be in there. You want it to be inviting and have just really good energy flowing throughout the room. Awesome. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from our beautiful living room in northern Vermont. Have a mindful, very creative day.